Welcome back, audience. Hope you're doing good. Cheers. Well, man, oh man. Anyway, in this video, I want to talk about the time fractals, or the time spiral, or um, the horizontal um, aspect of consciousness. That thing that sometimes we may not be aware of, but super, super important because sometimes we just put the blame and we point the finger on something, a person or an event or whatever, not realizing that that is not caused directly by, on that level, you say, it is caused by time itself. We sometimes think that something happened and that caused us to feel bad, for example, right? That's not what happened in actuality. As the time is going by, it has a certain type of challenging features in it. That's the part of this video game. And as these challenging features arises, the wrath and lust may increase, right? I'm just using those two words to simplify what happens. And then, as we talked before, then you have a capacity to pacify it with some pleasure, and it could be completely deranged and evil shit, and like a minor evil. They're all on the spectrum of evil. Anything that you do to pacify uh, your soul, or the ego in this case, with pleasure, is evil. You either participating in this evil, or whatnot. And there are levels of the evil. There are levels of demons, and of course there are these demonic entities at the top, that like the power brokers that recently kind of, uh, I don't want to get into the subject too much, but you see what I'm trying to say here. Like that, the highest levels of evil are now becoming apparent and revealed. Um, the true evil, not this belief fighting system, you know, of the lower demons. So, the true evil is pacified ego. The bigger the ego, the more is the evil, and the more evil stuff you have to do to pacify it. Okay. Now you have to understand something, that some people fall in this category of being, like I say, the controllers and rulers of the world, but they are actually, looking from this video game perspective, are losers. They're total losers. They're the biggest losers because they have the biggest egos, and now they need, I mean, they do all sorts of evil shit to keep themselves leveled, right? And sometimes people say, power corrupts and whatnot, but it's just the way the matrix is structured, and people tend to gravitate towards this. The more the power they gain, the more evil they become, because they have not really gaining any kind of power. They're just being sucked into this matrix game. Now, one thing that is very important to see, that they can't help it. They're not conscious. They are like automatons. They are robots. They are mechanistic. They are predetermined. They're scripted. Everything about them is 100% predictable. They're not real. They're not real souls. Okay? It's a video game challenge. They're not real. They have capacity to become real. I'm going to get into this a little later. whether through their own endeavors, and every single person can have a capacity to handle their level of demons, right? There are very deep ones, and there are a little bit like, more shallow ones. There are levels to that. And some people may be able, through this attention and awareness that I keep on talking about it, already align those little negative feelings that arises in their life, right? Already alchemize them. Now, of course, the word alchemist is really attributed to the highest level um, of demonic powers, like Constantine and figures alike, right? Alchemists. By the way, Krishnamurti was an alchemist as well, who was dealing with a very high level, these, you know, demonic powers, if you will, and was kicking ass and was teaching other people how to do this on their level. The reason I'm saying this is because we have to understand that there are levels, and we're all playing a certain level of difficulty in this life. Sometimes we level up and the difficulty increases, and it's required a lot more out of us. Like I made that video about lust and wrath control, and at this point in my life, um, at this particular point in my life, it's becoming more and more strict. The things that I can afford 5 years ago, like getting high, um, and just indulging and pacifying my ego all sorts of ways, I can no longer afford to do that. Okay. And so therefore, what is limited to me in this level of game, if I want to have my manifestations and my ideas, which are of course to do with the structure of the society, because I don't live in a vacuum. um, so my manifestations, my visions include the structures of the society as well, not just my own household, but also the structure of society. And this is why I keep on talking about this holistic society, because I know that's uh, a completely viable way to live on this planet. But the most important factor that must be addressed is this capacity for some, or people who are participating in the society must be able to have this basic capacity that is supposed to be known by default of entering this video game, and that is how to play it. And it all starts with state control and frame control, right? The state control, instead of pacifying the negative feeling, which is ego, from which all the belief systems stem. And by the way, they're all um, limited, they're all predictable, they have limited structures, and so therefore, like, it's not really your thoughts, right? Because if you're playing this specific character and if you're acting from the ego, all your thoughts are predictable, all the thoughts are just going to be the same. It's the same patterns. The more you look at how people function from the ego, the more you see. Now, but you also have the side of the soul, out of which you're going to be functioning as a unique individual, and alive and real, and not predictable, and current and real, you see. And you don't have any of these canned responses, which happens automatically. This is why it's such a tricky situation, uh, especially it is applicable in wrath control when it comes to this acting from the ego, from the little evil to the big evil, and knowing for the fact that once the person is operating from the ego, they're not in control. There's nobody's behind the wheel. It is automated. This is why it's difficult to, Jesus said, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do," right? Because, of course, like if you listen to this phrase, you'll see that there's some awareness that they're not in charge. There's this because the only thing that could be in charge is the soul, and the soul is completely eclipsed by ego. So, an ego is programmed in a scripted mechanism. So, to ask ego not to do this, it's impossible because it's a program. You see, it's just programmed. It will do. If the program says to do so, people will do it, no matter whether it makes any sense or not. It is absolutely programmable script. And so it is truly like in the video game, there are players and there are non-player characters, which is all this what I'm talking about. Anybody who acts from the ego is a non-player character or in a non-player character mode. Okay? And I don't know, maybe you know this about yourself. I sure noticed as well when I turn to, functioning in an ego mode where my pleasures get the best of me, or the seeking of pleasure gets the best of me. And but I have, in that moment, I have awareness is like, oh my God, like, look at this character. This character is completely, at that particular moment, is full of shit and has an agenda, and it has, um, you know, the the end goal in mind, and it's about pleasure. And look at this person or this personality trying to manipulate its way to get that pleasure. This is the what I'm watching when I start acting from the ego. And sometimes, you say like, well, if you become aware, why don't you just stop it? And sometimes I do, because it's not easy to get back in a on a saddle, so to speak. It's challenging, but I can do it. And sometimes I just watch it, and I just watch it to go all the way to the pleasure, and just to watch it. Maybe it's just my excuse not to, to stop it midstream, because I may be more out of control than I think. But um, but I have sufficient awareness that, like, my body right now is just being run. Okay, that I have sufficient awareness of that. And sometimes, whether I can stop that in midstream or not, that is, it's another question. Like I said, sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. Like at this point, after I made that video, to me it became clear that, well, at this particular point, I can't do it. It's because of the time fractals and what's the pressures that are happening right now. Time is always spiraling, so the pressures keep on being applied to you, right? The pressure to, sometimes people release energy as pleasure. Okay, but if you don't, it's going to keep on up, increasing, and you have opportunity to alchemize it and break through. And then if you do, you enter another timeline, because you handle this particular timeline. And once it's completely handled, you enter another timeline. You see, this is all state control. This is all alchemy. This is my favorite uh, name for this particular process. Meditation was used to mean that as well. Now it just became some mind pacifying nonsense. But meditation is not, you know, it can get brutal, brutal, brutal. Anyway, um, okay, all right. I hope you're following me on this one. All of this other stuff, like, oh, manifesting, is like, you don't even go to imagination. Imagination does work, but you don't even. It is like a look. Um, if you enter the timeline through your state control, and it's always going to be something that ego hates to hear, it's going to be not letting the energy to be released as pleasure. no, whatever gets you off, so to speak, right? Completely stopping that game completely. Okay, and the pressure to alchemize is going to increase. Now, of course, I'm talking about somebody, um, and I know that my viewers are also dealing with a high level of, you know, um, demonic entities. I know that, and because anybody else, you know, the intensity that I'm talking about is just not for everybody, right? There are a few people who are playing the level on this level, and it's totally fine, and other people playing on their level. Even though my advice could help anybody on whatever level they're playing, uh, I seem to talk to people just based on how many of you kind of contact me personally and what's really going on. I know what's going on. So anyway, besides the point, right? I was just trying to make a point that I know that you're very likely dealing with this high level of intensity, and that in this level of game, um, the discipline is, which is a frame control, must be higher. And the more you're disciplined, the more the frame control is there, the more pressure is being applied to do your state control, right? And the more challenging it becomes. And so the complete gangster and complete winner is when you are able to alchemize the entire timeline, which is one particular cycle, without falling off the horse. At no, you see what I'm trying to say? Because as time goes, it becomes more and more intense, more and more intense, more intense, more and more intense, and then can be so intense that like it requires crazy amounts of attention and awareness and focus, and not distracting yourself from it. Okay, okay, and so if you if you break through that timeline, you enter another timeline. Now, in that particular timeline, things are already kind of working your way. Now, imagination, when you use imagination now, because now you, to soul, everything is handled. Now you move in the mind, which, by the way, mind and imagination, I consider that to be frame control, not state control. State control, all in the soul and the heart. But the mind is a frame control, obviously, because you're dealing with the form. Whether you're moving objects and yourself within physical world or the astral world, it's about the frame control. Then you may see what are the logical reasons, and to do this, or uh, more like artistic reasons, or whatever you want to create, right? Then you engage your imagination when things are already kind of collaborating with you. But unless you break through in that particular timeline, which is your next desire, let's just be honest, that's what it is. Next, soul's desire, not ego tantrum, but soul's desire that's already coming your way. If you're solidifying in that timeline, then everything's working in your favor. Then you use your imagination, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to to rely on the mind, and on which is a frame control, without a state control first, because then your state control is not going to collaborate with you, your reality is not going to collaborate with you, and so then it's going to apply a lot more pressure for you to go into imagination and what's happening, why am I keep on doing this and it's not going to, no, you have to handle your state control first. Okay, and of course the frame control is about what you say no to and what you say yes to. Essentially it's the logics world, and and the logos world, right? It's like that. And the magic's world, of course, which is imagination, and I consider them in the same kind of category. Mind and body, they're about the frame control. There's a mind frame control where, um, like, um, what they call dream state logics. For example, there's a band actually. It's called Dream State Logic, which is really cool music. You should check it out. And And that's what they say, a trance state logic or dream state logic. It is logic that is functioning there and it's not what is functioning in the physical, but it's still kind of logical in if you understand how it all works. um, Things there in the astral, for example, are very fluid. For example, if you imagine a particular scenario, you may say, well, that's not real, that doesn't exist, it's not logical. But in trance, there's none of that critical inhibition. Whatever is being imagined, it is real. And so that's the difference between the magics and logics, um, okay. But there's still frame control. There's a frame control of the mind, frame control of the body. Okay, because they all work together, in the body and in these traditions. In the Hindu traditions, for example, they talked about Shiva, the destroyer, right? The Brahman, the creator, and then you had Vishnu, who is a maintainer, right? Vishnu is your mind capacity, Shiva is your body capacity, and Brahman is your soul capacity. Okay, that all of these ancient traditions and all these texts are to describe how your consciousness, excuse me, functionness, how your consciousness function. Okay, it is a map to this video game, but people have to have at least a little bit of capacity to understand what they're looking at, because if you give this monolith to a monkey, what you expect. So anyway, all right, so what am I saying here? um, the structure of consciousness and functionality of consciousness, how it all works, right? And this is why it's kind of depicted as people, and this is why in the Bible, right, like they're all just structures of consciousness. It all contain all of them, right? Abraham from the Bible is the same Brahman from the Hindu traditions, okay? And so you can see that it's just like the same overlap. This is why I like metaphysics, because metaphysics takes away um, this ambiguity and unifies all these different traditions and texts as one cohesive uh, whole, which is like physics but called metaphysics. And that's why I love that. I love geometry and how it all structured, and like how it works as a toroidal electromagnetic toroidal field. This is all to me in metaphysics, and this is all what I'm studying. And this is how you can decode any kind of tradition. They may be talking about it, they may not even aware what they're talking about, but you can see that okay, they're talking about this particular structure of consciousness. They all belong to you, and you can access all of them depending on the necessity of the game. Okay, and in the Christian ancient traditions, they talk about like these archangels, archons, and all of that stuff. They're all structures of consciousness to describe this video game. Okay, now so anyway, this video is about time fractals and how they work. One thing I want to mention is that um, this is why, as the time goes by, these events in your life happen, right? This is why you got to be careful, and you have to have like another level of awareness of what's really going on in the time, and just kind of zoomed out a little bit and have that attention where it allows you to see what's really going on. Every little thing in your life that happens, it's like you see, oh, okay. And so it kind of, you're not taking anything personal anymore, hopefully. And you can see how the world reflecting everything. The challenge arises and the shits kind of go haywire, and that's the now you can control your state, and that thing changes. It may even change immediately. Okay? And as you alchemize, you may notice that of course there are degrees of intensity, and sometimes you have something that is kind of easy in the breeze, and sometimes it's super super difficult. Okay? Now those super difficult times, it's like akin to the winter is coming, right? From Game of Thrones. There are winter times, um, which are, you know, spiritual winters. Now, during that time, the darkness is very intense, which just means that if you handle that level of intensity, you are entering at these deeper level states, the deeper states of consciousness. When it goes super super intense, you can be in a state of consciousness very similar to DMT experience. Okay, that's when you're dealing with a very high level of intensity. When the pain is so so intense that the breakthrough pain is the DMT state. Okay, with all the colors, with all the intensities, with all the awesomeness that the DMT has, it is totally accessible through this way. Okay, and as needed, there are times where you have to access these types of states and you handle that level of intensity. Okay, and there are times that is not, and the time, and it's this is why sometimes it may feel like, um, as you're alchemizing, it's just you feel kind of sort of giddy and joyful, and sort of akin to being high. This is what I've noticed as well, and sometimes it's more like LSD like, and sometimes more like a DMT like, the intensity levels, right? Because getting a little high is like a mellow uh, shift of states. LSD can be more intensive depending on the dose, and DMT is 6 7 density, right? Very intense, and 5-MeO is just complete 0 point. So you don't need to take any of these things anymore if you are eating all of that spiral of time, and that's what the snake eating its tail metaphor is all about. It That's what's all about, like uh, taming the dragon or training your dragon, whatever the phrase you want to use. It's about that, you know. Um, and so that's the game. Most important game. Most important game is to not to slip away and eat the entire thing, so to speak. Okay, and it may be starting from some mellow states of consciousness that's akin to being high, and going all the way to the DMT like, depending on time fractal. If it when it starts, it becomes kind of mellow. When it goes closer closer closer, the intensity increases, and that's what you notice. This is where the challenge becomes harder and the hardest at the last moment. But if you stay, you break through, and then you enter another time cycle, and this particular time cycle is already where your manifestation is going to be uh, fruitful. Okay. um, it may have its own challenges as well, but as a rule of thumb, these cycles seem to, once you go break through the really big one, the next time cycle you get to enjoy your rewards. And then if you come across, and if you keep on alchemizing there, you sustain everything, everything's fine. And if there's another time cycle comes along and says, all right, this is another level now, buckle up for safety, then that's what you do and you deal with it. What I'm trying to say here is that there are seemingly intervals. The challenge of the time fractal that is challenging you, after that winning, you have one cycle of complete breeze, okay? And then another cycle comes in that is challenging you again. That's what I've noticed. And they say that you can stabilize yourself and automatically alchemize everything on all the levels. But so far, what I've noticed is that uh, there is stability on lower levels for sure in my life, but like uh, this level, particular level that I'm dealing with, I'm still looking to acquire the stability. I have moments of coherence and intense coherence and super awesome, but I'm yet to completely integrate it and have that complete coherence where this alchemical process happens automatically and there's no more, slippages, so to speak. Or it appears so, you know. Who knows? But anyway, but I know that time moves in spirals. It has 12 stages. Um, every time it has one cycle, it moves closer. Intensity increases, moves in closer, and so there's every round is a level of intensity increasing. Okay, and each level has 12 stages. Okay, and so that's how it's structured. I mean, you can observe this in galaxies and the way they're spiraling around. It's not a coincidence because galaxies and these the biggest phenomena and the smallest phenomena are giving you the clues of how consciousness is structured. Okay, so that's the most important game we're playing, and the rest of your life of just going around and doing your regular stuff is just that you are exposed to more of these time fractals, right? Because if you stay in one place, you're not really exposed. But if you live your life fully and do all the things that you have to do, meet the people that you have to meet, then you're embracing that time fractal fully. You're facing the world, so to speak, right? The problem is that if you don't face the world and you don't alchemize everything that is happening in your life, um, then when you do go, the contrast is so high that it's too difficult, and basically it's almost like neglected garden. That's what it feels like, right? um, this is why i don't uh, I don't condone like this isolation approach or this monk approach. um, to me, this hermeticism and this isolation, it's not necessarily a that much of a physical thing, even though sometimes it's good to be by yourself. But by the way, uh, that becomes sort of natural, right? As long as you don't avoid or try to impose the frame that makes you avoid life. That let's just say that, as long as you are doing all the things that you have to do and meeting the people that you may not want to meet, um, and state controlling, frame controlling with everybody that you meet, it no matter how, you see what I'm trying to say, no matter how lost they are. In fact, that is part of it. In fact, that it's not about fighting with people, and this is what I'm learning. Um, is that yes, sometimes you have to say no to something that is unjust and unfair, and at the same time, you are the wrath that may arise in that moment after you say no in that person, it becomes your alchemical challenge. Okay. And in a way, you know, in a way, you are in charge of what's going on in your reality. For real. Not this is not some nonsense, another belief system and because living in a fantasy world. This is for real. This is what's really going on. This is when you work things out with somebody on this energy level, things do change and reality does change. Um, and it's almost like a demon, casting out demons out of people, so to speak. They become real. When the demons are no longer in control, when the ego is no longer in control, they do become real. Okay. And what else I can say about this? And you may even notice that, right? Like, for example, if you meet with somebody, everything's fine, and then you're not talking on a personal level, or like the stuff's going on like on some Instagram level or whatnot, right? There's a disconnect that's going on. And then if you meet the person again and you talk, you clarify things out, and everything's all right again. But that there's that what I'm trying to say. There is a necessity for the regular reconnecting with the people in your life for this particular reason of state control and keeping things running smoothly. Um, Taking care of your garden. And I before I had different view, and I thought that people supposed to be kind of more responsible. Why aren't they doing this? Like, why aren't they? Uh, why can't they figure out how to play this game of life? And I do understand that once you lose the control and the ego takes over, this it's all over. I understand that, so I'm not blaming when anybody's already in that state. But I don't understand why uh, there's such an or at least anyway. What I'm trying to say here is that this the most basic thing of how reality works and how everybody is functioning, the state control thing that I'm talking about, is such a basic thing that more people should be engaged in that and rely upon that rather than some uh, pacification of the ego, right? But now I'm saying, like, okay, if people are gonna end up doing it, that's fine, but I'm not going to ask them that anymore. If they're interested, I'll tell them, and but now the way I see it is, I socialize with people, I meet them, I feel everything there, I know what needs to be done, I alchemize the energy, things are evening out, and it's all right. And if I regularly need to meet in every cycle with these people to even things out, then that's what I'll do. Um, you see, because it's like that, if you don't, at least what I've noticed, if you don't, then the next time you meet him, or um, or if you don't meet them, you start feeling some very off energy from them, weird behaviors, and you see what I'm trying to say. It seems that the Matrix gets them, and the job is just like not to let them to be gotten by the Matrix. And there's going to be some people in your life, if not most, hopefully not most, but that are like that basically rely on you. They rely on you for state control because they're not yet capable of doing this, or they're just learning it. And it's cool. It's cool, you know? Um, but of course, at the same time, you want to have the closest circle who are alchemists, who can handle these things, know how to handle them, and proficient at them. You want to have that as your inner circle. And if you know that they are alchemists, then you can trust them. This is why, like, I think I've said this before. If people are not controlling their own state, you cannot trust them. Every soul is 100% trustable and trustworthy. Every ego is 100% untrustworthy. Okay? They're not trustworthy. And so you again, I'm not saying specific person because I can very clearly see that there are part of them that is super awesome and amazing, but sometimes they just you know don't get to take that side out for a play. Okay, so what I'm trying to say here is that as you socialize, do your work, do your state control, and just just know what you're doing. But I've learned this. This is why. This is why I'm saying why you can trust an alchemist, even though sometimes they may, slip and whatnot. That's all good. But the point of it all that an alchemist is so linked, or this is so strongly uh, gravitating towards the source that Matrix cannot take them out. It's just impossible. They're always gonna start looking for that real inner bliss and not external pleasure. It's just, you see, and this is why you can trust this type of person, right? And so that's what I would consider, you know, a not necessarily mature soul, but like active player in the video game. Your team. And it may be that we have to take others out of it, you see. And sometimes they don't want to be out of it, right? Like, for example, if you apply frame control and you say, hey, no, this is not okay with me, this is not fair, this is not how I function, they may you know raise these levels of wrath, and you may need to alchemize it. And if it works, it's fine, that's great, that person can stay. But sometimes they get triggered so much that they don't want to be in your presence, and they're avoiding you now, or avoiding being real with you. Okay, if that happens, um, or they try to be still slippery and weave their way out back into your life with a lie or some games or so, you know what I'm trying to say. Then of course you keep saying, like, no, that's not how friends behave, that's not how um, I operate. And that's it. And you have to say no, you have to control your frame. And that will be enough for the person to either decide to be in your presence and have these demons alchemized, so to speak, because they do have to have some level of surrender to surrender these demons, right? Now, if they don't, the process does not change in when it comes to your life. You're just alchemizing energies. You don't really care that much about what they're all about. You may if you want to, but this really is a distraction. Whoever you're talking to, if the energy arises to alchemize, you alchemize, and then what happens. Some people stay in a circle sometimes because after the alchemy you may raise so much light that they may not want to surrender their ego, run away. Okay, fine. But now um, they they are going on this journey themselves. This is much harder, but it is possible that they can have their own sovereign, if they end up being on the right path, their own sovereign light and love. Because the person like this, after you've alchemized the energy, is going to be living life in a continuous, as they call it, tower moments. Everything's breaking down. Karma is coming home. Chickens come home to roost. All of that is taking place for them. Okay? Not fun place to be. A lot of pressure to kind of break through. And in my experience, some people just can't handle it. And this is why they still have a choice to surrender their ego and reconnect with the people in their life who are really carrying the light, and not to connect with the people in their life who are carrying the darkness. Right? They have choice to do so. If they cannot alchemize the energies themselves. If they cannot alchemize the energies themselves, they don't really need anybody. And all the darkness that arising is going to be dealt with. Okay? But I'm yet to see somebody, I'm not saying no, that it can happen. These transformations do happen, and people who do some evil ass shit and don't want to face it end up being alone and isolated and, forced to deal with their suffering. And some people break through and everything is fine. But some people don't. This is this is why there's no reason to fight with people if you just control your frame and control your state. There's no sort of actual fighting there. Okay? Um, the fight happens inside of you. The frame control does not need any kind of energy wastage. Uh, to draw the boundary, it does not require a lot of energy. So this is why, like, there's no need to waste your energy by shouting, drawing the boundary. There's no need to do that. You can just simply draw the boundary with peace, and the boundary is drawn. So no need to waste energy there. Okay. All right. So frame control and state control. I adopted these little phrases. It's my pet phrases now because they explain so much. Thinking like what's it's all about, and realizing, oh, all right, all right. There's two sides to this game: the state control and the frame control. Everything falls under those two umbrellas. Fascinately, fascinately. I feel like there's something else that I want to say. Anyway, to summarize, time fractals goes in spirals. Every round, intensity increases. The pressure on wrath and lust increases. The breakthrough becomes possible to another level. Once a breakthrough happens, another time fractal is usually a breeze until a next level arises. And eventually, I think we go through all of those levels, all of these spirals, and stabilize in that. And it seems that then it becomes sort of like automated process, right? That's what it seems like to me. Now, the reason this holistic society would be functioning like that, because there are people who handling levels of the game, and so the people who are handling lower levels of the game, that's their challenge, will always be relying on the people who are having high levels of the game, right? That's their challenge, because if you don't have the structure, you would have what you see in the Matrix right now. Um, these fathering figures are evil, and so then they do not provide opportunities for the little souls to learn, and so they keep on pushing them into the ego. The whole society does not work. Matrix society does not work for this reason. But holistics does work, but it is a society. It is about being and hanging out and spending time together in a group, and letting each single person ideally deal with their levels, with their level. And if you have that type of structure, that pyramid structure, then you have functioning society. Because if the person who's dealing with their level of demons does not have the backup from this deeper level of demons, has no chance. Has no chance, because these deeper levels are not handled. So that person to break through in their little level is almost impossible, because they will enter in these very deep levels, and they're definitely going to say no to that, because they're just too small of a soul to handle these deep levels. Okay. So that's the game. As you can see, it's kind of very interesting metaphysical dance that's going on. And this is the reason I'm talking about this holistic society, because there is totally a way to live harmoniously on this planet. I can see it. I can see how it all works, and I can see how there are big stars, there's little stars, just like in a galaxy, just like in the universe. It's a reflection of what's going on, right? So, and that's my dream. That's my ideal dream, is to have people who are capable of handling their own level, and also um, being connected with people who are handling deeper levels, hanging out as friends, or whatever the structure of society may be. But we all must be continually hanging out. And I suppose, like you would say, like, well, how often? I think it's every cycle you have to reconnect. Because if you don't reconnect, then that coherence, that cohesiveness of the society starts falling apart. Okay. And honestly, this is what really angers me the most, when people defending their egos and insisting to, like, separate in some way. You know, they would rather betray a friend, and or they say, well, because what happened to me, some people just blatantly declared, because when I started alchemizing the energies, they just blatantly declared that they cannot be around me, or they said that they don't like my energy anymore, and they just left left my life. you know well, to me, that's kind of course, coming from the ego, and it's a very stupid thing to do. um right now, at this point in my life, I have no problem to talk with anybody. I would talk to anybody, really. Like, if somebody wants to talk, I would talk to anybody. Um, there's no person in the world with whom I don't want to. Wouldn't. Or there's no person in the world with whom I would not be willing to talk. Just for this realization that, um, just from this realization of how everything is structured, that's why I would not say no to that. Because I don't want to do that thing. I don't want to act from the ego, um, where some people do sometimes. But that's there. You see, so you have a limit there, because when people say no, or like they can't handle that energy, well, they not. This system is closed. Where the hell they gonna go? What else they going to find that is a way of life? Everybody's gonna be still returned to this thing, facing life as it is directly. Everybody's gonna be eventually, right? So where are they gonna go? They can say no, like, well, I don't want to hang out with you anymore because I don't like your energy anymore. And so, okay, you know, um, all the lessons will then be learned independently, and then there will be appreciation for people who are alchemizing these deep level energies. Because you see, that's another thing is that, um, to play this level of the game, to handling these deep demonic energies, it's very intense. And you don't avoid people, but this is why sometimes you being avoided by the people because of this reason. And so it may appear that you're not being appreciated. You know exactly what you're doing, you know exactly what kind of game you're playing, you know that is right, and you know that you're like, um, choosing truth and doing what's right in your life. And then it seems that things, instead of being rewarded, there's a punishment. See, that's what's important to realize, that this level of the game is also just a test. It seems that you did the right thing, but the punishment follows, right? Don't fall for this nonsense. Continue doing the right thing. Handle anything that needs to be handled. Like, for example, if people leave you because you become too intense and whatnot, okay, fine. Then, if you need to be dealing with that fact that somebody's leaving your energy, and you need to, um, find that if there is a lack in your system for the energy that the person was carrying, then you have to do the alchemy, reconnect, and find that energy within yourself. Okay? This is all okay. At the end of the day, I'm just saying that trusting the process is what's all about. Because appearance may seem like you're not being appreciated. Not only are you being appreciated, you're being punished. And sometimes you think, fuck you, like, these motherfuckers have no fucking clue of the shit that I had to go through, and they're just taking a piss. But that's part of it as well. Yes, you have to draw the boundaries, and you can say, all right, this person has no clue what's going on, and perhaps there's no reason, you know. Still, like, for example, not blocking them in a sense of uh, not willing to talk to them, but if they're taking a piss, you have to draw the boundary and say, like, look, no, this is not how it's meant to be. It's not working out, and you know, uh, again, this is another test for the frame control and state control. It's always about that. Anything that happens in your life is about that frame control and state control test. And I know at this level, life may appear kind of, you're living a life like a normal life. It may appear so, but it is far from normal at this point, because this holistic way of life is just uh, being gelled into its own new structure, right? And it's an awkward stage. It's an ugly duck stage. Before it turns into swan, it's an ugly duck. All right. Anyway, I hope that just gave you more clarity, more trust in the process, and faith that that is the right way. Uh, because, man, the test is brutal sometimes because you do want some sort of like expectation, or you have an expectation that there might be some approval from outside, uh, but it's not going to happen until you solidify in this new thing, and then it's going to happen, when you've done your work and you solidify your life and you're living in enjoyment. Then all these people who are talking bullshit is going to be realizing of what happened. But those people who stayed with you during the intensity, those people who had your back, those people who had not betrayed you, cherish them. Okay? Because those people who did and then came back later when everything's already done, they still can be friendly, they still can be your acquaintance or friends and whatnot, but they're not diehard friends. But the ones who are diehard, and the ones who been around during that intense period, these are your boys, these are your gals. Okay? Those are the ones that deserve the most uh, rewards after the game is won. And then everybody else is a secondary. They also deserve, but as a secondary. All right? Okay. I'm out, guys. I'm gonna watch a movie or something. Have a nice Saturday night. Peace. I'll see you in the next one.